When I met Eliza, everything seemed perfect. She was funny, adventurous, and had this magnetic charm that drew people in. We crossed paths at a friend's party, and from the moment she laughed at one of my jokes, I was hooked. It wasn't long before we were inseparable, spending every spare moment together. She had this spark, a way of making the mundane feel magical. Our relationship moved quickly, and within 2 years, we were married. At the time, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. But there was one thing I didn't know. Eliza had a secret, a bet she made with her best friend during a drunken night in college. The terms were simple and cruel. If she lost, she had to marry the next man she dated seriously, regardless of how she felt about him. I didn't know any of this when I proposed. To me, she seemed genuinely excited, even tearful, when she said yes. But as time went on, subtle cracks started to show in our marriage. It was little things at first. The way she avoided deep conversations about our future, her reluctance to spend time with my family, and how she sometimes looked at me with a hint of sadness I couldn't quite place. I chalked it up to her adjusting to the newness of marriage. Then, one evening, while cleaning out the attic, I stumbled across a dusty shoebox filled with old letters and photographs. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started flipping through them. At first, they were innocent enough. Pictures from her childhood, notes from her friends, but buried at the bottom was a folded piece of paper that changed everything. It was a handwritten note, dated a month before we got engaged. It read, "Eliza, I can't believe you're actually going to do it. I never thought you'd follow through with the bet. Marrying some poor guy just to prove me wrong? You're crazy. But hey, a bet's a bet. Can't wait to see how this plays out." My stomach dropped. My hands trembled as I read it over and over, trying to convince myself it was some kind of joke. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. A whirlwind of emotions engulfed me. Shock, anger, betrayal. The woman I thought I knew had been lying to me from the start. That night, I didn't confront her. Instead, I sat in the darkness of our living room, trying to process what I'd discovered. How could she marry me under such false pretenses? Did she ever love me at all? Or was I just the unfortunate result of a drunken gamble? But as I sat there, one thought consumed me. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The discovery of the note weighed on me like a storm cloud, darkening every thought. That night, I barely slept, my mind cycling through fragments of conversations, searching for clues I might have missed. Had she ever slipped up? Were there signs I had ignored? By the time dawn broke, I was no closer to understanding. I only knew one thing. I needed answers. When Eliza woke up, she greeted me with her usual cheery smile, unaware of the turmoil churning inside me. Her laugh felt hollow, her movements rehearsed. How long had she been playing this role? My heart sank as I realized I could no longer tell where the truth ended and the lies began. "Morning," she said, leaning in to kiss me. I flinched involuntarily. She froze, her eyes searching mine. "Everything okay?" "Yeah." I lied, my voice strained. "Just didn't sleep well." She nodded, unconvinced, but let it go. That was Eliza. Always avoiding confrontation, preferring to gloss over cracks rather than mend them. It wasn't until she left for work that I finally exhaled. I needed time to figure out how to confront her without imploding everything we had built. That afternoon, I dug deeper. I pulled out the shoebox again, combing through every scrap of paper for more clues. Most were benign, college essays, concert tickets, Polaroids. But then I found another note, this one crumpled and stained, as if she had tried to destroy it but couldn't bring herself to follow through. "Eliza, don't let this go too far. I know you don't love him. Why are you even doing this? Call me if you need a way out. Jess." Jess, her best friend from college. The same one who had apparently roped her into this ridiculous bet. Anger flared in my chest. Jess had known all along and had done nothing to stop it. If anything, she had encouraged it. I stared at the note, my hands trembling. A bitter laugh escaped me. For years, I had thought of Jess as a harmless friend who occasionally dropped by with wine and gossip. Now, I saw her for what she was, a co-conspirator in this farce of a marriage. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that Eliza had been so cavalier about it. She had kept these notes, almost like trophies. Did she feel no guilt? Or had she convinced herself that I'd never find out? By the time Eliza returned home, I was ready. She walked through the door with her usual air of nonchalance, humming a tune and tossing her keys onto the counter. But the moment she saw my face, her expression faltered. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with unease. I held up the notes, my gaze locking onto hers. "Why don't you tell me?" Her face paled, the color draining like ink spilled into water. For the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in her eyes. Her eyes flicked to the notes in my hand, and in that instant, I saw her walls begin to crumble. Eliza was a master of charm and deflection, but she hadn't prepared for this. Not for me sitting there, notes in hand, the weight of her betrayal hanging between us. "Where did you find those?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In the attic," I said, my tone colder than I intended. "Buried in a box of keepsakes, alongside what's left of my faith in you." She winced, stepping closer. "Let me explain." "Oh, please do," I interrupted, holding up the crumpled note from Jess. "You don't love him. Why are you even doing this?" "Those aren't the words of someone celebrating a happy marriage, Eliza. They're the words of someone who knows this is a joke." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in years, she looked small, unsure of herself. But my patience had worn thin. "So, is it true? Did you marry me because of a bet?" She sank into the nearest chair, her hands trembling. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Complicated is forgetting an anniversary or arguing over money. This is deceit, Eliza. You married me under false pretenses. You lied to me for years." Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not yet. I needed the truth, not her guilt. "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you do this to me?" She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the floor. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "It started as a stupid game. Jess and I were drunk, and she dared me to turn my next serious relationship into something bigger. I didn't think I'd ever follow through. But then I met you." Her words hit me like a slap. "And I was just what? Convenient? An easy mark?" "No," she said, her voice breaking. "At first, yes, it was about the bet. But then, I fell for you. Okay? I didn't plan on loving you, but I did. I do." Her confession landed hollow in my chest. I wanted to believe her, wanted to cling to any shred of the life I thought we had. But the betrayal loomed too large. "And you thought I'd never find out?" "I don't know," she admitted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought, maybe if we were happy enough, it wouldn't matter. That we could move past it." "Move past it?" I echoed, incredulous. "You lied to me every single day of our marriage. And now you want me to just forget that and keep playing house?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I was going to tell you," she pleaded. "I just didn't know how." "It's too late," I said, my voice steely. "You had years to tell me. You chose not to." The silence that followed was deafening. She cried openly now, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. All I could think about was how carefully she had constructed this illusion and how easily it had shattered. I stood, the weight of her lies pressing down on me. "I need some air." As I walked out the door, her sobs echoed behind me, but I didn't turn back. The cold night air hit me like a slap, sharp and bracing, but it did little to calm the storm inside me. My mind was spinning, replaying every moment of our life together through this new, twisted lens. The proposal, our wedding day, the anniversaries, the quiet nights spent on the couch. All of it now felt tainted, stained by her secret. Had anything about us been real? Or had it all been some elaborate act? I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, my thoughts a chaotic blur. I remembered the way Eliza used to light up when we talked about our future, the way she'd laugh at my stupid jokes, and how she'd reach for my hand in the middle of a crowded room. Was that her, or was it part of the lie? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't tell the difference anymore. That terrified me. Eventually, I found myself at the park where we'd shared our first kiss. It was quiet now, the swings creaking softly in the wind, the streetlights casting long, eerie shadows across the grass. I sat on the same bench where we'd once laughed about how awkward that kiss had been. It felt like a lifetime ago. Back then, I'd believed we were starting something pure, something honest. Now, it felt like the punchline to some cruel cosmic joke. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over Jess's number. She was the only person who could confirm the truth, but I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. Instead, I opened my photos and began scrolling. Picture after picture of Eliza and me, smiling at dinners, hiking in the mountains, holding hands at a concert. Each image was a painful reminder of the life I thought we'd built together. My chest tightened as anger bubbled up again. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. But I also wanted to understand. Why had she stayed? If I was just the fallout of a drunken dare, why had she gone through with the wedding, the vows, the years of building a life together? Was she lying when she said she loved me? Or was that the only truth in the mess she'd created? I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at the photos, before I felt my phone buzz in my hand. It was Eliza. Please come home. I need to explain everything. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let her sit with the weight of her actions. But something inside me wouldn't let go. I wanted answers, even if they tore me apart. When I got back to the house, she was sitting on the couch, her face streaked with tears. She looked up when I entered, her eyes full of desperation. "Thank you for coming back," she whispered. I didn't sit down. I stood across the room, arms crossed. "Start talking." And she did. Eliza sat on the couch, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. She opened her mouth to speak but stopped, as if the words were caught in her throat. Her eyes darted to mine, searching for something, understanding, forgiveness, maybe even permission to begin. I stayed silent, my expression cold. I wasn't here to make this easy for her. "I don't even know where to start," she finally said, her voice trembling. "Try the beginning," I said, my tone clipped. "Why did you do it?" She took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It wasn't supposed to happen. The bet was just a stupid game. Jess and I were drunk, laughing about how immature guys were in college, how most of them weren't serious about relationships. She dared me to prove her wrong, to find someone who'd actually commit. It was childish. I see that now. But at the time," she trailed off, shaking her head. "At the time, you thought you'd turn a man's life into some twisted experiment?" I snapped. "No," she said quickly, her eyes snapping up to meet mine. "It wasn't like that. When I met you, the bet didn't matter anymore. I liked you. I really liked you. And I didn't think it would go anywhere serious, so I didn't see the harm. But then you surprised me." I laughed bitterly. "Surprised you? How?" "By being a decent human being who trusted you." She flinched but pressed on. "By being someone I could see a future with. You were kind, patient, and real. You made me feel things I hadn't felt before. And by the time I realized how serious things were getting, I was terrified to tell you the truth. I thought I'd lose you." "Terrified?" I repeated, incredulous. "You weren't terrified enough to stop lying. You married me, Eliza. You stood in front of me, in front of our friends and family, and vowed to love me forever. All while keeping this secret." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt no pity. "I know," she whispered, "and I hate myself for it. I wanted to tell you so many times, but the longer I waited, the harder it got. I thought, maybe if I worked hard enough at being a good wife, at making you happy, it would make up for what I'd done." I shook my head, pacing the room. "That's the problem, Eliza. You think this is about making up for it. But this isn't some small mistake you can apologize for and move on. You built our entire marriage on a lie. How am I supposed to trust anything you say? Anything we've shared?" Her sobs grew louder, and she buried her face in her hands. "I don't know," she choked out. "I don't know how to fix this. But I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove that to you." I stared at her, my heart torn between anger and the faintest glimmer of hope. But the question I couldn't shake was simple. Was love enough? Her confession hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I leaned against the wall, staring at her as she wept into her hands. Eliza's words replayed in my mind, each one slicing deeper. She loved me. She didn't mean for this to happen. It wasn't supposed to go this far. But how could I believe her? She had spent years lying, crafting a life on a foundation of deceit. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Everything we've built, was it all just a way to cover up your guilt? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. No, please, you have to believe me. I loved you then, and I love you now. It was real. Every moment we've shared, our wedding, the trips, the late-night talks, it was real. Was it? I countered. Because right now, it all feels like a performance. Like you were just checking off boxes to convince me, and yourself, that this lie could work. Eliza stood, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. It wasn't a performance. You have to know that. Yes, I started this relationship for the wrong reasons, but my feelings for you were never fake. They grew. They're real. I wanted to believe her, to cling to the possibility that some part of our life together had been genuine. But doubt seeped into every corner of my mind. If she could lie about something so fundamental, what else had she hidden from me? You say you love me, I said, my voice rising with frustration. But love doesn't look like this, Eliza. Love doesn't manipulate or deceive. You stole my choice, my right to decide if I wanted to build a life with someone who wasn't honest from the start. She flinched as if I'd struck her. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I've hurt you, and I hate myself for it. But I'm here now, telling you the truth because I can't live with this secret anymore. I want to make it right. How? I demanded. How do you make something like this right? Her silence was deafening. She didn't have an answer, because there wasn't one. No amount of apologies could undo what she had done. No promises could restore the trust she had shattered. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. I don't know, but I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't walk away. Don't give up on us. I let out a bitter laugh. You mean don't give up on the lie you started? The one you've been desperately trying to hold together all these years. She started to protest, but I held up a hand. Stop. I can't listen to this right now. I need space. Eliza's face crumpled, but she nodded, stepping aside as I moved toward the door. As I left the room, I felt her eyes on me, heavy with sorrow. But I couldn't stay. I couldn't breathe under the weight of her betrayal. For now, all I needed was to be anywhere but there. The cool night air did little to clear my mind. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring as I tried to make sense of everything Eliza had said. The weight of her betrayal pressed against my chest, suffocating and relentless. She claimed to love me, to have grown past the initial deceit, but her words felt hollow. If she truly loved me, why had she waited until I found the notes to come clean? I pulled into the parking lot of a diner, its neon sign flickering weakly against the darkness. It was nearly empty, the perfect place to think without interruption. I took a seat at a corner booth and ordered coffee, though I doubted I'd drink it. My hands shook as I scrolled through the photos on my phone again. Our wedding day, her smile so radiant it could light up a room. I used to think it was the happiest day of my life. Now I wasn't sure what to feel. The waitress brought my coffee, giving me a sympathetic smile I didn't have the energy to return. I stared at the steaming cup, my thoughts spiraling. Could I ever trust Eliza again? Did I even want to try? Part of me wanted to walk away, to cut my losses and start over. But another part clung to the memories, the laughter, the quiet moments that felt too real to be fake. As I sat there, my phone buzzed. A text from Jess. Eliza called me. She told me you found out. I'm sorry for my part in this. I never thought she'd actually go through with the bet. If you want to talk, I'm here. My grip tightened on the phone. Jess, the one who started this whole mess. The one who dared Eliza to gamble with my life. I should have been furious, but all I felt was exhaustion. Maybe it was time to hear her side. Maybe she had answers that Eliza couldn't, or wouldn't, give me. Without replying, I scrolled to Jess's contact and pressed call. She picked up after 2 rings. Hello? She answered, her voice cautious. It's me, I said flatly. I want the truth. All of it. No sugarcoating. There was a pause before she sighed. I figured you'd call. Look, I won't defend what we did. It was stupid and immature. I dared her to marry the next guy she dated seriously, and she went along with it. But I didn't think she'd actually fall in love. I thought it'd fizzle out like every other relationship she'd had. And when she didn't? I asked, my voice icy. I told her to end it, to come clean before things went too far. But by then, she was head over heels for you. She was scared you'd leave if you knew the truth. She should have been scared, I snapped. She should have told me anyway. I know, Jess said softly, and I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I think she really does love you. I ended the call, no closer to clarity than I was before. All I had were more questions, and a growing realization that the life I thought I knew was gone. Jess's words echoed in my mind as I sat in the diner, staring at my untouched coffee. She really does love you. It was meant to reassure me, I suppose, but all it did was deepen the void inside me. Love? Was that supposed to excuse years of deceit? Was it enough to overwrite the betrayal that had turned my life upside down? I paid for the coffee I didn't drink and left, unsure of where to go next. Home didn't feel like an option. I couldn't face Eliza's tearful apologies again, at least not yet. So I drove. The road stretched endlessly ahead of me, their familiarity offering a strange kind of comfort. Without realizing it, I found myself in front of my childhood home, now empty since my parents had moved into a smaller place a few years back. It was a modest, one-story house, its white paint peeling from years of neglect. But for me, it held memories of simpler times, when life's biggest problems were scraped knees and math tests. I parked the car and got out, sitting on the curb in front of the house. The night was still, save for the distant hum of traffic. I pulled out my phone and hesitated before dialing my dad. We hadn't talked much lately, just the occasional holiday call or quick catch-up. But right now, I needed his steady voice, his no-nonsense perspective. He answered on the third ring, his voice gruff but warm. Hey son, everything okay? No, I admitted, my voice cracking. Dad, something happened. With Eliza. There was a pause before he said, go on. I told him everything. About the bet, the notes, the years of lies. I didn't hold back, letting the words tumble out in a rush. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then he spoke, his tone measured. That's a hell of a thing to find out. Yeah, I said bitterly. What do I even do with this, Dad? How do I move forward? He sighed, and I could picture him rubbing his temples the way he always did when he was thinking. Son, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. Trust is like glass. Once it's shattered, you can try to piece it back together, but the cracks will always be there. You have to ask yourself if you can live with those cracks, or if it's better to start fresh. His words hit me hard. Could I live with the cracks? Could I look at Eliza every day, knowing how our life had begun, knowing that she had stolen my choice? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to try, but another part, I don't think I can forgive her. That's for you to figure out, he said gently. Take your time. Don't let anyone rush you. Not her, not yourself. You'll know what to do when the time comes. We talked a little longer before I hung up, feeling both comforted and conflicted. The road ahead was still unclear, but at least I knew I wasn't entirely alone. As I sat there, staring at the house where I'd learned so many lessons about life, love, and resilience, I realized one thing. The decision ahead wouldn't just define my relationship with Eliza. It would define who I was, too. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for a faint light in the living room window. My chest tightened as I sat in the car, staring at the place that had once felt like home. Now, it was just a shell, a structure filled with broken promises and unanswered questions. I knew Eliza was inside, likely waiting for me, rehearsing the next round of apologies or explanations. Part of me wanted to drive away, to avoid the confrontation I wasn't sure I could handle. But the other part knew I had to face this head-on. I stepped out of the car and approached the door. The quiet click of the lock as I turned my key sounded impossibly loud in the still night. When I stepped inside, I saw her immediately. She was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of hope and dread. "You're back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "For now," I said, setting my keys on the counter. I didn't sit down. Instead, I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms over my chest. I needed time to think. "And?" she asked hesitantly, her hands gripping the edge of the blanket. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I studied her, searching for any sign that she wasn't being genuine. But all I saw was a woman consumed by regret. Whether that regret was for what she'd done or for being caught, I couldn't yet tell. "You say you love me," I began slowly. "That you always have. But you also spent years lying to me. How am I supposed to reconcile those two things?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly struggling to find the right words. I don't know," she admitted finally. "I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could change how it started. But I can't. All I can do is show you that what we've built since then has been real." "Has it?" I asked, my voice rising. "Because every memory I have of us is tainted now. Every laugh, every kiss, every moment. It all feels like part of the lie." She flinched as though I'd slapped her, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It wasn't a lie," she insisted. "Yes, I was wrong to keep the truth from you, but my feelings for you are real. They always have been. Please, you have to believe me." "I don't have to do anything," I shot back. "You took away my choice, Eliza. You decided for me what our life would be without giving me a say. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Her sobs grew louder, and she buried her face in her hands. I wanted to feel anger, to hold onto the righteous fury that had driven me all night. But seeing her like this, so small and broken, made my resolve falter. "I don't know if I can do this," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can live with this with us." Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. "Don't say that. Please, don't give up on us." But the truth was, I didn't know if there was anything left to give up on. Eliza's plea echoed in the quiet house, her voice raw and trembling. I wanted to say something, anything, but my thoughts were too jumbled to form coherent words. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a crumbling bridge, unsure if I should try to cross it or let it collapse entirely. Every instinct screamed at me to protect myself, to walk away before the weight of this revelation dragged me down further. "I don't know what you want me to say," I finally managed, my voice hollow. "You're asking me to believe that everything we've built is real, but how can I? You've lied to me for years, Eliza. Years. Do you even realize what that does to someone?" Her face crumpled, but she didn't look away. "I know," she said quietly. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. And I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough, but I am. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said, the bitterness in my voice cutting through the room. "Sorry doesn't rebuild trust, Eliza. And it doesn't erase the fact that you made a bet about our relationship like it was some kind of joke." She flinched at my words, her tears falling faster. "It wasn't a joke to me," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes, it started that way. But the moment I realized how much I cared about you, everything changed. You changed me." I scoffed, shaking my head. "You keep saying that I changed you. But if that's true, why didn't you tell me sooner? Why wait until I found out on my own?" "I was scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought if you knew, you'd leave me. And I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me wanted to believe her, to cling to the idea that her love for me was real despite the lies. But the other part of me, the part that felt betrayed and humiliated, wasn't ready to forgive so easily. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You say you couldn't bear to lose me, but don't you see? By lying to me, you were already losing me. Every time you chose to hide the truth, you pushed me further away." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and I hate myself for it. But I'm begging you, please, give me a chance to make this right." Her words hung in the air, a desperate plea that I wasn't sure I could answer. I turned away, unable to meet her gaze. The weight of her betrayal and the depth of her remorse clashed within me, leaving me torn between anger and sorrow. "I need time," I said finally, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "Time to figure out if there's anything left to salvage." Eliza's sobs filled the silence as I walked to the guest room, closing the door behind me. For the first time since our marriage began, I felt truly alone. The next morning, I woke to a quiet house. I'd half expected Eliza to knock on the guest room door or try to talk to me again, but she didn't. When I stepped into the kitchen, I found her sitting at the table, staring blankly into a cup of coffee. Her eyes were swollen, and her hands trembled as she clutched the mug. She didn't say a word, and neither did I. The silence was thick, the kind that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. I grabbed my own mug and poured coffee, each movement deliberate as I tried to keep my composure. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, she broke the silence. "What now?" she asked, her voice small and broken. I set my cup down and leaned against the counter. "I think we need space." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. "Space?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I can't figure out how I feel about this, about us. With you sitting there, watching me, waiting for me to forgive you. I need time to think, to breathe." She nodded slowly, her hands gripping the mug tighter. "Okay, whatever you need. Just don't give up on us." Her words hung in the air as I left the room, already planning my next steps. I packed a small bag and made a few calls. By the afternoon, I was in the car, heading to a friend's cabin a few hours away. It was secluded, quiet, and exactly what I needed to clear my head. The drive gave me time to reflect. I thought about the life we'd built and the lies that had been woven into its foundation. I thought about her tears, her apologies, and the desperate hope in her eyes. But most of all, I thought about myself, about what I wanted, what I deserved. Did I still want this marriage? Did I still want her? Or was it time to let go and start over? At the cabin, I spent hours staring out at the lake, watching the water ripple in the breeze. I turned off my phone, needing to disconnect from everything, including Eliza. The quiet was both a balm and a torment. For the first time, I was truly alone with my thoughts and the enormity of the decision I had to make. By the second day, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The initial anger and betrayal still lingered, but it was muted now, replaced by a deep sadness. I realized I didn't just mourn the betrayal. I mourned the loss of the life I thought I had, the love I thought we shared. I pulled out my phone, hesitating before turning it back on. There were several missed calls and messages from Eliza. Most were short and desperate. "I hope you're okay. Please let me know you're safe. I love you. I'm sorry. Please come home." Her words tugged at something deep inside me, but I wasn't ready to respond. Instead, I called my dad again, needing his steady voice. "Son," he said, his tone warm, "how's it going?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I keep asking myself if I can move past this, but I don't have an answer." "You don't have to have one yet," he said gently. "Take your time. No one's rushing you." "Thanks, Dad," I said, feeling a small measure of comfort. "I'll figure it out." On the third day, I finally texted Eliza. "I'm okay. I just need more time." Her reply came almost immediately. "Thank you for letting me know. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Her patience surprised me. I'd half expected her to demand answers, to beg for forgiveness. But she didn't. Instead, she gave me the space I'd asked for, and that made me wonder, was she truly trying to change? Was she willing to rebuild what we'd lost? The next day, I drove back home. The sight of our house filled me with dread and hope in equal measure. I didn't know what I'd say to her, but I knew we couldn't keep living in limbo. When I walked through the door, she was waiting. Her eyes lit up with relief when she saw me, but she didn't rush to embrace me. Instead, she stood still, letting me set the tone. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. She nodded, gesturing to the couch. We sat, the silence between us heavy but not unbearable. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the toll this had taken on her. "I've been thinking," I began. "If we're going to try and fix this, we can't do it alone. We need help. Therapy." Counseling. Something. Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. Whatever it takes. I'll do anything. This isn't a promise, I warned. I don't know if we'll make it, but I'm willing to try. For now. Her tears spilled over, and she reached for my hand. For the first time in days, I let her hold it. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Therapy forced us to confront the lies, the hurt, and the trust that had been shattered. Eliza laid everything bare. Her fears, her guilt, her love. And slowly, I began to see her not as the woman who betrayed me, but as someone who was deeply flawed, yet genuinely trying to make amends. Rebuilding wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to walk away, to leave the pain behind. But there were also moments of hope, moments when I saw glimpses of the life we could build if we worked hard enough. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt like we had a chance, not because of what we'd been, but because of who we were choosing to become. Together.